Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I see folks coming into our educational seminar. We want to say thank you for joining us. Appreciate you spending your afternoon. We'll get started in just a moment. We're going to let folks pile on into the room with us. Hello, Carmil. Nice to see you.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for spending your time working on this content. I know you've put a lot of energy and effort into it, and it's going to be awesome.
Got my fingers crossed.
We are confident. So we're going to go ahead and get on started. I want to say hello, welcome. My name is Anissa Avon, and I am the CEO of TurnKey Coaching and Development Solutions. And welcome to our Leading in a Crisis virtual summit, actionable business and HR strategies for navigating crisis and change, sponsored by TurnKey Coaching Solutions. And I'm excited that Carmil Surritt is going to join us today and talk about words matter now more than ever. And we had so much interest in this topic today, Carmil. So I think you've hit a bell that is kind of important.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, so I want to say quickly, thank you to our sponsors, without which the summit would not be possible. One is the Whitmarsh Consulting Group. His team of multi-channel marketing experts have been awesome. So thank you, David, and your team. Also want to say thank you to Insperity, HR that makes a difference, and share with you guys that two things. Insperity never hesitated when I said, what do you think? Would you mind sponsoring our webinar? They stepped right on up and said, how can we serve? And then they also said, when I went back and said, what would you be willing to give our audience for free? What's a service that is high value and might be of interest? And they thought about it. And then our business performance advisor over there said, how about an HR financial analysis report and debrief? And I was a little confused by that at first because I thought, well, that sounds interesting. What is that? Well, come to find out, it's about a 3 to 10 hour analysis based on data that you provide and a confidential one-on-one debrief. And the reason that they're offering that, even though they know that not everyone that takes advantage of this is a good fit for their company, is they said, we know that HR departments are suffering. We know that entire organizations are suffering, and where's the buck stop with that? It stops with HR. So whatever your budget was prior to March 2020, we know is very much changed. So if that free report would be of service to you, do check it out, turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/HR report. And finally, I want to say thank you to our partners over at TurnKey Coaching Solutions that have put together a fast response to crisis management strategy from here. The now what strategy. We know that business is not going to go back to business as usual. It's going to keep on being business unusual. And if our team can support you in realigning your strategy, our approach takes in a lot of consideration in data. It also is based on 650 individual CEO interviews that the research was based on. And it's not free, but it's the next best thing. It's name your own price based on what would work for you and your organization. So if we can be of service, that would be my privilege and pleasure. As I mentioned, my name is Anissa Avon, and I'm the CEO of TurnKey Coaching and Development Solutions. And when I reached out to my team to say, let's not talk about what we're going to do because life has just been turned upside down. Instead, let's see how we can serve. What can we do for others and just hand the rest over to whoever those higher powers are that are in charge, because we are not. And I reached out to Carmil and I reached out to other experts, and within a matter of minutes, we had a full list of amazing talks for free. And we're adding more all the time. We've got 42 plus on the books right now. And it's every Wednesday and Thursday in April and now through May. So join back, check it out. Tell us what talks you'd like to see, and we'll make that happen. So Carmil, I'm really, I've taken some time to stalk you online to really understand who you are. And I have to tell you that there's your passion for the work that you do and what you are bringing forth Just so that you guys know, he's an executive coach. He's a life coach. He's truly a communication specialist, and he's dedicated hundreds of hours to the work that he's done for the Mankind Project as an instructor, and even before that as a student, now as a lead curriculum designer. He also brings over 19 years, I think I read, of experience in insurance and financial and estate planning, and then 35 years in sales and marketing and management, including the oil field industry, manufacturing, robotics, and advertising. So he's this truly unique blend of business mindset with communication and a passion for helping others. So thank you, Carmil.
Yeah, thanks. That all sounds really good. Well, thank you. And so today I'm going to share something that actually started in the very beginning of that whole thing. And that was, I wanted to understand how I ticked on the inside. What made me do what I do? And then when I figured that out, I started looking at why other people were doing what they were doing. And what I boiled this down to over the years is how important our words are. And what I've been learning lately is how it affects our brain and how we can either trigger the other person into fight or flight or frozen response, or we can say things in such a way to create trust.
Yeah.
To build security.
Yeah.
So I'm going to run through a couple stories and give you some examples.
I want to ask you something real quick. We didn't actually get to acknowledge the work that you did with Paul. And I know that you did a lot of work with Paul. So I just want to say thank you to Paul and ask you to share just a brief bit about your work with him and how this topic came about.
Yeah. He and I were mentoring under another man for the last 3 years who had spent most of his life understanding the effect of words on us. Both our internal shame levels and how we can say things differently to express ourselves without causing all the conflict and all the fear that most of us are experiencing. And Paul is boy, he's my brother from another mother. He's like the other half of my brain some days.
I love that.
Great partner to work with.
Beautiful. Well, tell him thank you. We appreciate all of his efforts in bringing forth your session today.
Thanks. So you ready?
Yes, let's do this.
All right. So we'll go through a couple of stories and we'll see how that feels for you, and you can detect the differences. And then we'll give you some solutions, how to utilize this right away. Okay. So words, they matter for our success, and they matter for our relationships, our careers, actually for every endeavor we have. They matter for our health, our happiness, our accomplishment, and for our sense of safety and security. So that's why I say now more than ever.
Yeah.
You know, our courage and our confidence and belief in yourself all come from the words that we use. It's the fuel. It's the connection. So we can choose words that I can soothe or comfort. I can create trust and connection, or I can imply judgment and trigger a warning, activate that reactionary brain. And when that happens, the brain starts to turn off every involuntary system and starts to go into fight or flight. So that we really want to be able to take a breath. I'll go into a lot of that. There's a lot of breathing involved. And how I can move up to the higher part of my brain where I have imagination and creativity and reason, and I can persuade and innovate and create. That doesn't happen when I'm down in the reactionary side. Okay, so let's roll to the next slide. There we go. So before we go on, I want to explore the differences in the words we speak. So I'll give you 2 short stories. And the first one is actually a real story from my career in the robotics industry. And that was, we're on a Monday morning meeting and we were working on a strategy, and we had a new manager on our team. And you can go to the next slide. And he says, go ahead and go to the next slide. There you go.
Here we go. Nope, there it is.
Okay. And he says, I don't think you understand the problem. You did a good job, but this feels really incomplete and you need to do better. What you should have done is paid attention and not wasted my time. So take a deep breath. What may have just happened in your body? Switch to the next slide. Did your body, did you sense any change? Did your muscles tense up? What did you feel emotionally? For me, I get a feeling. I feel like a gut punch when someone talks to me like that. Mm-hmm. And then emotionally, I get fearful. And then it starts, and that fear usually starts to tap on shame for me, that I'm bad or I did something bad. And that shame is what covers fear. And we all have them. And they're fears of rejection, fear of failure, fear of abandonment or loss. And the one we're often afraid of now is pain and illness. So take another deep breath. There you go. We go to the next slide, let it out. And I'll tell a different version of the same story. This is the one I wish I had heard. So we're on a Monday morning meeting. We're working on a new strategy. And the newest manager of the team comes in and says, I'm wondering, how did you define the problem? I like what you've developed, and I'm curious how we might enhance the possibilities to get our desired outcome.
Yeah.
What would you like from me or the company to support you in bringing this online so that we can take care of the client, secure the relationship, and achieve our goal? How does that feel? You can go to the next slide. How does that feel in your body?
Much more open, much more relaxed, much more interested in what you have to say. The first reaction was a bait and switch. What do you mean, but? You just, oh, so you didn't mean the compliment you just said, right? And now I'm like, oh, well, you're curious, and oh, how can we? And I've got some ideas about that. So suddenly it's a two-way dialogue.
Yeah, engaged and valued is what I heard you say. And yeah, awesome. And that brings collaboration, and it brings innovation, it brings all kinds of things to the table when we have that experience between us. So the two different reactions are because of the words we used.
Yeah.
And the reason that happens is because what inside of us, our brain is sending different signals. There's two different processors here. One is the amygdala, which you may have heard of, and the other is the prefrontal cortex and cortex, the front and top part of the brain. There you go. And most importantly, those two systems are going to respond to fear or lack of fear. And there's a way that we can utilize this. So the primary function for the brain is survival. And the part responsible for safety is the amygdala. It's deep in the brain, and it's the fear center. It takes in all those signals to put us on high alert. I describe it sometimes as the physical body's ADT home security system. It's always monitoring for problems. Mm-hmm. And so when that happens, and what it does is it dumps chemicals into our body to prepare us for fight or flight. Cortisol and adrenaline. And when we perceive that fear, if we can go to slide 9, we we get a release of chemicals that make our pupils dilate, our hearts beat faster, we'll hold our breath, or it'll speed up, and all non-essentials get turned off, like digestion, immunity, and the body goes into this, I have to stay alive, and everything else other than that doesn't matter. So this was great for our ancestors when they faced real life dangers and predators every day. But today, our dangers are invisible. And our predators come from the bullies. They use shame and fear and blame and doubt to prey on other people. Mm-hmm. So our predators now are words like not, but, and should. Mm-hmm. Those are the words that can fire up that amygdala and fire up that alarm system super fast. So we'll go down to the next slide and show you how this works. In a time of crisis, our fears play a major role in triggering our defense. And as a society, we have a ton of fears. Fear of criticism, fear of judgment. We actually have a special section in our brain that just alerts us to rejection. And when the body experiences those fears, even fear of health or fear of losing our life, it goes into survival. And once that threat's come about, we only have usually two choices. We can go into victim, or we'll try to hide that fear and we'll go into being a bully. Mm-hmm. Someone's asking me what that section is. I'll come back to that question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's actually in the orbital lobe in the bottom of the right front part of the brain. Is exactly where the alarm system is for rejection. So one of the things I want to do is I want to share a story of how we continue to react when we're facing these potential fears. Fear of criticism, judgment, rejection, all of those. So have you ever had, Anissa, have you ever had an emotional reaction to traffic?
I claim the fifth. No, of course I have. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't live in a city anymore. I used to have all those when I lived in big cities, but I'll share a story with you and see how this resonates. So one stormy day, I had a meeting down the hill from where I lived. And it was a super curvy 2-lane road all the way down to the American River, a couple thousand feet, and back up the other side. And normally it takes 20 minutes. So I came in on down the road, I came through a few hairpins, and the rain just dumped, a total gully washer. And I couldn't even see. So with the wipers on high, I come around a couple more corners, and there's this little tiny old pickup truck doing about 15 miles an hour, all the way down to the bottom and all the way up to the top. And I'm just spinning out. I know I'm going to be late. Why don't they pull over? What's wrong with those guys? Why are they so rude? Blah, 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 blah. And I make up this whole story. Did that ever happen?
Yeah, that's happened on a few occasions, even recently.
Yeah. So how did you feel afterwards?
Well, I've done enough of this work to know that it's not how I want to show up.
Okay.
So, but how I feel afterwards is definitely not vindicated, not right. You still feel the emotions of irritation even after they're no longer in your experience.
Beautiful. Yeah. Go to the next slide. And that's the reactionary brain. That's when I'm down in that lower brain and all I can see is problems. And yeah, thanks, Sheila. Feel guilty about it. Definitely. That's the feeling that what I did is bad or wrong. So that's great. So that's the amygdala hijack. And how we can get out of that amygdala hijack where our reactionary brain is taken over, it's driving the bus, is we step into and have a tool that we're all given, and that's the higher brain, the higher prefrontal cortex. That part of our brain is responsible for focus and attention, predicting consequences. And it's the part of the brain that actually starts that flow of oxytocin. And oxytocin is trust. How we interpret the flow of oxytocin is safety or trust in our body. And that calms down the amygdala and sends that through the whole entire body. When that happens, we now get to go back up and use our human part of our brain that has things like creativity and imagination, logic, understanding. All of that part comes back online for us. And when we're using the nots, buts, and should, and I'll show you that in a minute, I'm actually doing that to the other person. So their ability to perform at their best has just been squashed. So one of the things that causes a lot of pain and disruption is, slide 13, is that we use the word should. And should, like, you know what you should have done? Or the word not, like, that's not what I wanted, or that's not how I would have done it. And we create that fear in that other person, then we've basically infected the trust and the connection of that relationship, and it may not be repaired. So
off. Is this the slide I'm supposed to be on?
That's the one I'm going to.
Dreaded but, okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to the dreaded but. And but before I go there, I want to say that we've been given a really neat built-in mechanism that deactivates that defense mode, and that's the breath. That the breath actually is, tells our gut to release, tells our heart rate to normalize, tells our hormones and adrenals to stabilize. The breath is an amazing tool. And if we'll just take one or two before we go react, we can have entirely different outcomes. So one of the things that's come about is the neuroscientific research over the last 20 years of the brain is staggering. It's absolutely amazing what we've discovered. And when we can get to that higher functioning brain, we basically distinguish ourselves from all other animals and primates because we can choose our words, we can think, we can ask questions, and we can reason. When I'm reactionary, none of those things happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And are you, I'm going to ask a question I know the answer to, but if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that the neuroscience research is also showing that this breathing process and the act of intentionally breathing in a couple of times activates our ability to access our conscious or our higher brain.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. I can master your state by stopping and taking that breath.
You know, that's an important statement, and yet, and you'll probably get to this a little bit later, so steer us in the right direction here. It seems to me, though, that it's very easy to discount the value of breathing, the value of that this is actually a tool that could be so simple and yet so effective.
Yeah. It's absolutely incredible how it can change the outcomes. Physically, relationships, all about. So let me give you another example. And the next example is, I want you to notice your breathing. You can sometimes put your hand on your chest and feel your breathing changes while I tell this story. And this is the story of the dreaded but. So we can go down to slide 14.
There we go.
And this is also a true story, that when I was a kid in school, I always strived to get good grades on all subjects. And I'd get an S for satisfactory and occasionally an UN for unsatisfactory. And often that was for talking in class, I'm sure. But one of the things when I was a kid was we had to carry our report cards home to mom and dad. And I still can remember that report card shoved deep down in my pocket, dreading what might come later that night. And if there was anything other than an A or a B, the conversation went like this. That's a pretty good report card, but you should have done better in English. I wish you could go play with your friends, but with that English grade being what it is, it looks like you're going to be spending a little more time on your vocabulary words.
Yeah.
Can you relate to that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The fear of the but. Did your breathing change or did it stay the same?
Interesting. My breathing actually stopped in that moment.
Yeah, mine still does 50 years later. That I still feel that in my body. And what we talked about when I started this work a long time ago, and one of my very first teachers shared with me that BUT is an acronym. And it stands for Behold the Underlying Truth. Everything I set up to the but is a lie. Here comes the real truth. So it's often shaming, and it definitely throws me into survival. And it's a simple word, and I work with my coaching clients and executive clients. If we can just remove the but,
yeah,
everything can change.
And amazingly enough, most of us don't. We feel this experience, but we don't necessarily equate to changing our words in order to have a greater impact and influence and demonstrate greater compassion and even authenticity. We don't mean to say, I'm sorry, but, and discount the I'm sorry, but that's how we operate. Not all of us, but, you know, as a general rule, I see this a lot.
Yeah, it's cultural. And I'm going to throw another one at you, and this is the word should. Yeah, the should story. So should is also potentially very shaming. And years ago, I did one of those jobs that just somehow never made it on the resume. And let's see what happens in your body when I share this story. I was a telemarketer, the old kind. Follow the script, word for word, if you want to get paid. And with the call would go something like this. Good afternoon, is this the business owner? I'm calling for the Santa Clara County Deputy Sheriff's Association, and the men in uniform would like to know if you were safe last night when you were home with your family.
Oh.
You know, Mr. Obligated Citizen, the brave men and women that risk their lives for you every day are needing your support. And if you value your family's safety, you should let them know by contributing to the project that means so much to them. And that's supporting the kids for the annual circus day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one that's for the underprivileged kids that could grow up to be a problem in our community. So I know you would agree that the hardworking officers shouldn't have to come up with every dollar for a community project like this. And I'm sure we can count on your generosity and support. Feel that?
All I know is if you had knocked on my door, I'd be pulling out my checkbook, even if I didn't want to.
Yeah. And my boss knew that. He knew that you were willing to pay to quit feeling that. The question was how much?
Yeah.
And I hated that job, but I learned so much. that those poor me, poor us victim words and the underlying tone of, if you don't support us, you may be the next victim. And we can say, sorry, we warned you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the should and the shouldn't are the way that we transfer fear. I'm actually offloading my fear by putting it onto you. And so that I don't have to feel it. And fear, I have the acronym up there, is false evidence appearing real. Another term I've heard is false emotion appearing real. So let's go down to, yeah, there we go. Clear communication. How do I describe what I want and avoid the words of should, not, and but? So when I see, what would the camera would have recorded? And what do I feel? What's coming up from my body signals? What kind of sensations am I having? And then thinking. Most of us respond, especially if the fear and stress levels are high, to how can I use some curiosity and stay away from the judgment? And the last thing is, what do I want? Most of the time, people communicate with what they don't want. Don't do that. Don't leave it there. Don't do this. That scares me because I have to figure out what it is you do want. So that's why it's real important to connect into what's going on. So I think, where are we here? All right. Yeah, storyteller. This is one of the most amazing things I've ever discovered. And that is in the neuroscience. They actually found behind the left ear a part of the brain that lights up when there's missing information, missing data. And what it does is it fills in the blank. It fills in the missing information. That's why people have such a difficult time describing a car accident, because they're missing a lot of details because of fear, and this storyteller in the back is plugging in all the extra information. It's also where we self-shame from. So when we have incomplete information, we tap into our number one original fear, and that's the fear of the unknown. So by using my breath and moving up to my higher brain function, I get out of the reactionary part and I move to the upper part of the brain, where I have curiosity and compassion, imagination. And I'm either on the feeling side, where I'm dropping into victim and I'm feeling like you're bullying me, or I can move to the high part and say, maybe they're not doing so well. Maybe they're stressed out. Maybe there's something going on with them that I didn't know. And oftentimes we make it about us. I'm taking it personally. You know, I love Don Miguel Ruiz's books and his sons on the 4 agreements and the 5 levels of attachment, because most of the story that this storyteller makes up is to keep us safe, but it's usually shaming or blaming and keeping us small. Mm-hmm. So, any questions so far?
Yeah, so I have some questions, and if you're on the call and you're listening in, do ask your questions as well. I'd love to see how how we can really drive out some answers, Carmil, about how this works in a work environment. Let me give you some examples. Yeah. There are times when it is simply more direct to say, you know, if you're going to go on that interview, you really should wear professional attire. not meant as anything less than helpful, but how does someone not use the word should? And frankly, that's a conversation I have with my daughter. If you really want to do well in your class, you really should spend more time studying. What's the dance there that we're supposed to do instead?
I'm curious.
Mm.
I'm wondering.
I'm wondering if you really want to do well in your class.
Well, that's your fear, right?
Right? That's right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So I'm wondering, how are you enjoying this class?
Mm-hmm.
What are you getting out of it? What do you want out of it? What would make it more interesting for you?
Mm-hmm. And tell me how, like in the setting of a work setting, and you're really wanting to engage in an effective dialogue with a coworker around something, let's say personal hygiene.
Okay.
Right? Let's take a hard one.
Okay.
And you care enough to say something. How are you supposed to monitor your words and still be direct enough for someone to get it? Because you and I both know that there are times when a person will not say anything because they don't want, right, to hurt my feelings. And I don't want that. I mean, if I've got mustard on my nose, I desperately want someone to tell me, right? But at the same time, there's this desire to understand that words matter and how we choose our words matter. And yet there is a gap between what you're sharing, becoming masterful in what you're sharing, and perhaps where we are. So how do you move in that direction in a conversation like personal hygiene, for example?
Yeah. So, and this is something where I was never taught. Yeah. I've had to absorb this from osmosis and all the times I've said it incorrectly or caused a reaction. And really what I found out is when we give advice, people take that as judgment.
Okay.
And so if I ask permission, hey, if I notice something that you may not be noticing that could be derogatory for you, would you want me to mention it?
Beautiful. Beautiful. So in a healthy relationship, asking permission is better than saying, hey, you should. Let's take our current situation. We have a lot of folks who are having to lay off employees, and and some of those employees are our friends, right? These are people that we've worked with for 5 and 10 and 20 years, and they're struggling.
Yeah.
And it'd be, let's fast forward 6 months and some of them are still struggling to find a job, or fast forward a year and that's still happening. How might someone have a dialogue that is supportive without saying, I know that this has been hard, but you really should be applying more deliberately to more jobs. I know that this has been a difficult time, but you haven't even updated your LinkedIn. I mean, those things are judgmental. How would you approach that given what you're sharing?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the old saying of people need to know how much you care.
Yeah.
And if I'm actually connecting with a person, I'm going to spend time in finding out why they are feeling stuck. What are they feeling? And if they're saying I'm stuck, so tell me about that. Tell me more. And I'll hear what's going on inside of them. And then as a good coach, I don't give advice ever. I ask the question so that they have oh, I could do that. Or, oh, maybe I could try that. That's where their own inspiration starts to come online to step out of that stuck victim-y role and into recreating their life.
Well said. And I think what you're sharing that's really important is that we don't have to be a trained coach to learn how certain words and the way that we say something and the judgments that we hold impact those that we care about and make us less effective in getting what we want out of life also.
Absolutely. I mean, and what I see in a lot of the work I do right now is, particularly I work mostly with men, and the isolation is so toxic. And as men, they don't know how to connect to their spouses, their employees, even, and most of them don't have any friends. And by having them learn to shift their language and listen a little more as opposed to having to speak all the time, they start to build a little more trust and a little more connection with each other. And that to me is how we all move forward. And there are tough times and there are tough decisions. And a lot of my friends are going through those. And I listen. You know, one of the things women are best at is listening. They're so good at listening without having to put their story in it. And once I've built that connection, then they may say, hey, could you help me with this? Or, you know, can I brainstorm with you on how to help you move forward? Or how can I support you?
Yeah.
What do you need?
Yeah. We have a question. Have you heard of IFS, internal family systems, and do you think those have workplace applications?
I am unfamiliar with those.
I'm not familiar with it either. I suspect it does, especially if there was some resonance to what you're saying. I want to share with you a couple. Bettina says to move from reaction to a better response mode, which is what you're sharing.
Yeah. Is she asking how to do that, or is the
just a comment?
Yeah, exactly. I used to hear in my relationship with my wife, before I learned all this stuff, that I would start out the morning on a lower disc. And that was like a 6-disc changer, where as soon as I said something negative, I go to the next one. And then I get more upset and I drop to the next one. And she finally said, maybe you should stop when you realize you dropped one and figure out how to go back up instead of going all the way down to the bottom of the tray and then working your way back up again. And I said, well, how do I do that? And she said, ask questions.
Okay.
Ask questions. These questions right here. Take some breaths. And first, know that I'm triggered. Then what did I see and what am I feeling? And then the other one that's really powerful is, was there a specific agreement? Most of the time, we're really slippery, especially I am as a man, that, hey, I'll meet you next week for lunch. Well, chances we aren't going to ever meet for lunch if it's set out like that. If I say next Tuesday, a little more chance. But if I say next Tuesday at the diner on Main Street at 11:30, there's a pretty good chance we might meet for lunch. So if that didn't happen, that probably would have ruined that relationship, or at least put a big dent in it. So it's real important how I engage my agreements, how I manage my expectations, and realizing most of that drama between me and someone else is usually happening within me.
So this is also bringing forth a spotlight on the words that we say to ourselves matter.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the science that has shown the little spot that lights up behind our left ear that fills in the blanks? What does it fill in the blanks with?
Well, the brain hates a void. It can't stand a gap in information. So if we see something and then the screen goes blank and then we see something else, our brain immediately fills in what happened. That's why we go into a dark room. Our brain is filling in all the potential dangers that could be in that room.
Yeah.
And usually when someone says the not, but, or should, what shows up in my storyteller is where I'm not enough, or I don't matter, or I don't count. Those old storyteller beliefs get fired up.
So you've heard of the causation and correlation conversation, right?
Yep.
So I feel like what you're also sharing with us is that our brain will fill in and make up stories about what caused what that may not have anything to do with the reality. Give you an example. We have a client who has had to lay off a large portion, and they're just heartbroken about it, of course. And a large percentage of the employees understand. They've done a great job at communicating the situation. They're holding town halls even and meetings even after employees have been dispersed to make sure that they know, here are your options, here are how we're going to support you. Call me anytime, I'll review your resume. And there's 700 employees that, right? So and they're 100% there every waking hour. But there's a certain percentage that are stuck in, why me? Why did you let me go? And they've let off, I want to say right now it's 90% at this point. And so there's a certain percentage that really have a difficult time not making it about, why would I be the one that you let go? And I think my question to you is, if you're in an HR role and you're responsible for these really tough conversations, you can't necessarily change how they perceive the situation. I mean, that's in their mind is what I'm gathering, but you can manage how you communicate. What is your take on developing that, managing my skills, managing what I say and how it impacts others?
Yeah. Well, most of how I'm going to respond to the other person is projection. I'm going to project my fear and my doubt, my worry onto you.
Okay.
As in a form of judgment. And if I set my judgments aside and understand that if they're still wondering and worrying and confused about why this decision was made, that's coming from them. And I have to be there for them. I have to listen to them, because chances are that trigger didn't come from this layoff. That trigger of why me has been in there an awful long time.
Mm-hmm.
So to see them as a whole person instead of just an employee or just a clerk or just a shipping person or just a whatever, see them as a person and understand there's a lot going on inside this person, and a lot of fears are lit up if they're looking to blame someone else.
That's a good way to put it, lit up. The brain's going to fill that in with whatever fears have been running rampant. The missing piece will be filled. This is about me. There must be something wrong with me. That's what you're saying. I must not be good enough. This wouldn't have happened if I was better, kinder, whatever it is.
Yeah. I'll give you one more example of the storyteller and we'll wrap it up. But
yeah.
Remember that rainy story I was driving up in the road behind the pickup truck?
Hmm.
So I finally get a chance to pass. There's a little passing lane at the very top of the canyon. And as I pull alongside, I'm ready to look over and scowl and honk and make a few gestures. And I look over and I see two young men with their arms out the window, pulling on a string to make the windshield wipers go back and forth.
Wow.
All the anger, all the frustration, all the judgment was based on the story I made up while it was happening. So that's the nuts of it. To wrap it up, I'll just put a cap on this and see if we've got a couple more minutes for questions. But we have two processors, one for survival and one that's our higher functioning. We learn we have a storyteller that fills in the blank. And we learn that our words matter. When they're unclear, we trigger fear and shame in the other person. And we offload our fear onto each other. We also learn that breathing and asking questions can help us move to that higher way of being, higher level of functioning. And when we get to the upper part of the brain, we find that's where our genius lies. That's where our compassion lives. And if we can change our words, we can change our relationships internally and externally, and we can really connect, because that is what we need so much right now.
Very good. We have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Trina says, would it be possible to go over should again? Had to take a call and missed that part.
Yeah. Should is a judgment. Should puts me into react. And when I trigger that react, I'm triggering fear. And there's a great YouTube from Alan Watkins and he shows how just a little bit of stress can destroy our performance. And it's the words we use that cause stress with each other. When I should on you, you're afraid. Or when I get should on, I'm afraid.
And so one of the takeaways that we might take away from this is removing should from our language. But how might we also take away not getting triggered when someone shoulds on us?
That's the second agreement in the 4 agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And that
My book is so worn out. The pages are thin. If you guys are not familiar with that, check out Don Miguel Ruiz's The 4 Agreements. And then David Dibble did The 4 Agreements in the Workplace, which is a great way to apply the principles in corporate office.
Yeah, I'm taking it personally. And most of the time, it's other than personal. They're just reacting. They're dealing with their own demons and their own fears and their own anxieties and their own self-judgments. And really very little of it has to do with the other person.
That's a fair statement. So just having the awareness that what's coming up for me, several times throughout our time together today, you've asked, what am I feeling? What are you feeling? What are you feeling? And initially I thought, well, Carmil, you've already asked that question, but now I get you had a point to this. There was a method behind your madness. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is about self-awareness.
Totally.
And acknowledging what I am feeling allows me to see, is my little brain working or my big brain?
Yeah, exactly. And emotional intelligence is the ability to label those feelings. And I know it as a man, when I started doing my men's work stuff, we were allowed 2 feelings: angry and really angry. And when I learned that there was a third feeling of happy, it's like, I haven't felt that one. Okay, we'll have to work on that one. And as that grows, and I can actually explain and share and connect with what's going on with me, I can also make space for you to share what's going on for you. And half of it is what you're feeling. The other half's what you're thinking about it.
Very good. John says, things are not always what you perceive. Perhaps that's a good takeaway.
Rarely are they what we perceive. Thanks, John. Right on.
Yeah, exactly. So I know that you've prepared some specials just for our group. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that. And then I want to make sure people have your contact details and know how to get a hold of you.
Yeah. Paul Newell, my partner, and I are fine-tuning an introductory class so that people can use at least the awareness of not, but, and should, and what's going on in the brain. Gain that knowledge, because knowledge can help us make different choices. And then I value coaching, and particularly executives, because of the ripple effect. It starts to change the people around them and change their families. And I really love doing individual and executive coaching.
Mm-hmm. Well, and thank you. These are significantly reduced prices. So I really appreciate you for offering that. What is the introductory class that you're talking about?
So we're going to do a 3-session, 90-minute class on the material that we just covered, on how words matter, how to make different choices, how to use our body as an awareness tool to see where I am in that reactionary spectrum, and how to really use those tools when I'm in crisis, when I'm freaking out. I can use them when everything's cool. How do I learn to use them when things aren't so cool?
Fair enough. And things are not so cool right now. So
things are not so cool. And, I look at the media and I turn it off most days because I have no idea what's true. And if I get all worked up about someone else's opinion, that ruins my day. So
talk about things filling our little brain.
Totally. Yeah. So I want to invite everyone, as you see this, if there's anything that I've said or you would like to know more about, please reach out to me directly and I will definitely get back to you. This is important. It's important to me. It fits my life mission to do this, and fire away any questions. I'll be glad to spend some time.
Thank you. Thank you. And I encouraged you folks to take advantage of that. Visit his website, send him an email, connect with TurnKey. 2 things I want to make our friends aware of is our trainers have put together many crisis management and crisis in chaos for teams workshops, and they've put together some packages that are specifically for virtual training, buy one get one, so that you can have the twofer for your teams. And then we've also been requested to put together some outplacement services packages, and we have packages for executives all the way down to frontline virtual packages. Either way, if we can support you in your goals, it would be our privilege. Carmil, this has been a very different conversation and very enlightening. And it also reminds me that much of the work that you're talking about is self-awareness, and what we do internally has a huge impact on those we care about and our job and our performance all the way around.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Likewise. Let me read a couple of takeaways for you real quick. Takeaways: keep breathing, listening, and asking questions. Let's see. Thank you, Carmil. Thank you so much for your time. Super session. Wonderful, wonderful seminar. Great presentation. So good stuff, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking forward to anybody fires something off. I'll get back to you right away. Thank you so much.
Stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Will do.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and healthy.